Hi guys, this is Mr. Benson. This is your lesson for March 23rd, 2020. Um, this is the beginning of our online learning, and let's see how we do with our PowerPoint today. Our aim are, what were some major social developments of the Roaring Twenties? So for your do now, look at the images that I've placed here on this slide of the 1920s. What observations can you make about life in the 1920s? I'll let you take a moment. I'm going to stop right here and I'll be back in a second. When you're ready, just resume. Okay, now that we're back, some of these images that you might have seen, hopefully you noticed that it seems like there's some dancing taking place. There's looks like people are listening to music. Looks like this guy over here is trying to sneak some alcohol. And we also have some people here discussing things against evolution. So let's get started with our slides. So first off, the Roaring Twenties is the decade of the 1920s in which there were many significant societal changes. I know some of you guys have been reading The Great Gatsby with Mr. Lubing, and anytime you've seen movies based in the 1920s, very often you'll see lots of dancing and people having fun, drinking, smoking, and doing a bunch of other things. So one of the things that happens during the 20s is advertising becomes a big thing. During World War I, production of wartime goods was very, very high for the country, but with the war over, lots of factories still wanted to make a lot of products, but they don't really have the necessity of a war, so now they start going to consumer goods, and you have to persuade people why they need certain products. So if you take a look at this right over here, Lamar reducing soap. This is advertised as a soap that will help you lose weight, basically. Over here we have an advertisement for cigarettes. I find this interesting that in their advertisement they're telling people how physicians think cigarette smoking is a positive thing to be doing. Another one here, a lot of the advertisement starts playing on this idea of males trying to impress females. So if you take a look here, here's a man trying to get the attention of a woman, but she's not interested in him. And why not? Because as you can notice down here, his socks are falling down towards his shoes because they're not being able to be held up. So they have garters for men to hold up their socks. Another thing we see over here, you guys are familiar with this company, Listerine, still makes mouthwash today. It says, "How's your breath today? If it's bad, you won't be welcome. Play it safe and use Listerine." So basically they're trying to play on people's thoughts and ideas about what they need to do to be impressing other people. Okay, one of the big developments or events that takes place is called the Scopes trial. Some people call it the monkey trial. There was a teacher named John T. Scopes who was teaching evolution in the public schools in Tennessee. And a big conflict erupted when this guy got arrested for teaching evolution because that was against the law in Tennessee at the time. And what happened was this basically becomes a big media-driven event where you have some people on one side talking about how they support traditional values like the Bible and so forth, and other people pushing back saying that schools should be able to teach about evolution and other basically the point of view that you don't have to believe every single word of the Bible as it is and be teaching that in a public school. Okay, guys, so in New York City we have the Harlem Renaissance. This is a movement, a cultural and musical and artistic movement. There's a lot of jazz music played. If you notice right here, we've got Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, two famous musicians, and right over here we've got Langston Hughes, famous poet. In Google Classroom, you're going to see a video I pasted of somebody reading his song, his poem, I Too. So please make sure you make note of that. Okay, now one of the big developments is a change in the way women are dressing. So before the 1920s, one of the common things that many women had done in the late 1800s and early 1900s, where they were wearing the Victorian form of clothing, where notice skirts are going all the way down to the ankles or below, and women are keeping their hair up nice and high, but it's still long hair, but it's just being held up. And many women are wearing these corsets, which are super, super tight around their waist. The main point is to try to give women an hourglass figure, because that's supposed to be what's appealing to men. But if you take a look at what this is doing to women's bodies when they're putting this thing on. It looks terribly uncomfortable. So in the 1920s, we have the flappers. This is the style of the more modern woman. She wants to go against that whole Victorian idea, and so her hair will be up, but her hair will actually be cut short. It's not long and just held up, but it's actually cut short because that's supposed to be easier to manage, much more comfortable. Notice the higher skirts. They're coming right about to the knees now. The clothes are much more loose fitting and just easier and more comfortable for women to wear. They can kind of move around and not be so confined. And now they're also starting to show off their arms a little bit more, and which would be quite shocking for many of the older women to see this form of dressing. Another thing that happens is, if you guys remember, during the Progressive Era, we discussed a group that had started even before that called the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and their goal was to ban the sale of alcohol. Basically, they wanted to get rid of alcohol in American life. There were other groups as well, like the Anti-Saloon League, and they ultimately did get what they wanted with prohibition. There was the 18th Amendment and also the Volstead Act. Basically, these laws banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol, and the Volstead Act said what the punishments would be. Turned out a lot of people didn't like this idea and chose to continue drinking alcohol anyway, even though it was illegal. And some people sold alcohol. By the way, manufacture and sale of alcohol is what was illegal. Drinking it technically was not illegal. But obviously that's going to be hard to get it when it's going to be illegal for people to provide it to you. So speakeasies would be illegal bars. Sometimes in movies you'll see people open this little sliding door here where you can just see their eyes, and you'll have to say a secret password to get inside so that they can avoid detection by the cops. And people who were selling alcohol illegal we would call bootleggers. You guys are familiar hearing that term today. If there's a movie out in the theaters and you can buy a DVD copy, you're like, oh, it's a bootleg. it's like an illegal copy that's out there. Well, this is where the term originates. Um, there was actually a legal way to get around drinking the prohibition on alcohol, and that was to get a doctor's note, as Winston Churchill from England had apparently done while he was in the States. And this is apparently the doctor's note from 1932, basically saying that he should, according to his doctor's orders, be allowed to drink a naturally indefinite amount of alcohol. So here are the notes. The Roaring Twenties, a decade of dramatic social change. The Scopes trial, some people also call it the monkey trial, was about teaching evolution in schools, and it showed this strong conflict between more traditional values and more modern values. The Harlem Renaissance, this was an African-American artistic and musical period of achievements, and the Flappers, the modern woman of the 1920s, and Prohibition, which was passed with the 18th Amendment, made alcohol illegal, and it's basically going to be illegal throughout the 20s, and it's not going to be until 1933 when, with a new president in office, Franklin Roosevelt, Congress passes and ultimately ratifies the 21st Amendment. It's the only time in history that one amendment basically deletes another amendment. If you ever look at an American history textbook, very often they'll have all the amendments of the Constitution. The 18th will still be there, but very often you'll just see a line through it because it's not in effect anymore. Okay, your exit ticket for today is: which of the topics discussed was the most significant social development of the 1920s? Obviously, this is up to your own opinion, but I care about how well you explain it. So then for homework, there was a Roaring Twenties packet that I handed out in class on Friday, March 13th. If you did not get that packet, I will put a copy of it in Google Classroom so you can download it, and you'll have it there. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact me through Google Classroom. All right, guys, let's see how this new thing works, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the online learning, and I'm kind of enjoying trying it out. Have a good night. Check you later.